Jumpin' In on Manx Radio.
With Howard and Chris Kane.
Hello.
Good evening.
And welcome. And once again, here we are in the Jumpin' In studios. Studio 3, of course, it doesn't really alter that much. For some of the best in modern and contemporary jazz around the planet, wherever that might be, with myself, H.
And me, Chris. Yes, welcome along to this week's show and White Rabbits for Thursday as we dive into February head first for the daily Sea Dippers, although even they must admit it's been a bit parky of late. And ladies, not that there's anything really to stop you, but being a leap year traditionally, as it's the 29th of Feb it'll be your turn to pop the question. So, H, with February underway, what's warmed you up this week and what has been the coolest thing you've heard other than the Arga breaking down at Christmas?
Yet again. I'm actually looking forward to the 1st of March, the release of a new one by the Emile Parisien Quartet, Let Them Cook. We've got a sampler of that one for you to check out. We mentioned the other week, Henri Texier had one out in 2023, which flew under the radar somewhat in Indian's life. I have a real copy of that, which I rather enjoy. And continuing my celebration of the centenary of the birth of the wonderful Max Roach. And boom!
Woo! Fantastic. And for me, we're wet, we're here, we're blue, and in advance of spring, we'll start in the garden with the Garden Jazz Orchestra. Gardyn from the Garden Jazz Orchestra, spelt Gardyn, their self-titled debut. In their words, composed of world-class musicians from across the Philadelphia region, the Garden Jazz Orchestra has an unmistakable style and ability to inspire people. Each show is juiced with hip arrangements, strong musical soloists, and unkempt hard grooving provided by the rhythm section, derived from the Saxon word gar, meaning weapon, and din, meaning sound or alarm. Combined the termination er at the end, gardener, which means warrior. Put it all together, and boom, I give you the Garden Jazz Orchestra. I was wondering why he took so long in the garden. They're the warriors of sound, they say. Coincidentally, I'm sure, the band is also led from the front by saxman, composer and band leader John Gardner, spelt Gardner in the normal way. I fancy his name being the same and him being Gardner. Great stuff.
The mind boggles. I've got another boom coming up a little bit later on, actually, with M-boom. But first, some small cheese. At least I think it's small cheese. Nano fromage. I think that's small cheese in French. Sorry, I could be wrong. Micro cheese. Who knows? However, it is on the latest outing from the Émile Parisien Quartet. A wonderful sax player, been around. I always think of him being sort of relatively new. It's actually been together, the quartet, for 20 years.
What?
And they've got, I know, a new one coming out on the 1st of March. In the notes it says, when accidents happen, they're normally over in a few seconds. Not some of mine. Sometimes minutes. This one's been going on for 20 years. 2 decades since the members of Émile Parisien's quartet first played a jam session together. And at the end of it, they all looked at each other in disbelief and realised they'd been hit by a collective musical thunderbolt and had brought something special into being. The new album is on Act. It's called Let Them Cook, and here is Nano Fromage. Yeah, interesting. I haven't had a chance to really, we're just debating that, how we get into albums. There's so much more music coming through these days, or so it seems, or access to so much more music, I suppose. It's difficult to get to stuff in depth in the same way. And who'd have thought Emile Parisien, the quartet, had been around for 2 decades? That doesn't make you feel very old indeed. Let Them Cook, yeah, very interesting. A mixture. It's not just straight acoustic, it's got the electronics in there as well. It is, they say, a breath of fresh air with a band sound now firmly and unmistakably of 2024 rather than 2004. And they date this back to a concert in Sweden near the end of their double screening album tour, when they took a chance and tried out a move from an entirely acoustic sound to incorporating some electronics. As I say, what I've heard so far, I've really enjoyed. It's fresh, it's a bit different, it's got that electronics in it, as well as Emile Parisien's wonderful sax sound. And nothing, I would say, hard swinging as such. It's a mixture between atmospheric, slightly free, got a bit of that. It's certainly very modern and sort of slightly edgy, but sort of not so much ECM-y as more sort of on the electronic side, and slightly freer, if that's the way you like your jazz, with sort of, again, pictures that certainly conjure in your mind as you listen to some of it. Emile Parisien on soprano, saxophone and effects, Julien Thuré on piano, Ivan Gelugne, I think it is, on double bass, and Julien Lutillier on drums and electronics. On Act, thanks to them for sending it up, and you'll be able to get a physical copy in your favourite record shop if you have one. Go to your favourite record shop and support it if you have. If not, all right, go online. And it will be out on the 1st of March.
And they're becoming few and far between, physical record shops, sad to say. Although perhaps with the price of vinyl, then they may come back a little bit more if they get sufficient volume in sales. And cassettes are coming back. I saw 2 or 3 adverts.
I know. Cassettes are knocking around, and who'd have thought vinyl was still going so strong? Albeit it's about 30 quid a pop now, isn't it?
I'm sure we all miss being tangled up in the car with a cassette of your favourite music wrecked. Next, a familiar name on the show, and someone we have featured many times before, Espen Berg, with a new band and a new recording, showing so much of his side as a composer rather than just as a pianist. Water Fabric was originally commissioned by Jazz Fest Trondheim in 2020, and this new set of music was premiered to standing ovations at 3 festivals during 2022. Let's hear Hydrophobic. And there it disappears down the plug hole, so to speak, hydrophobic, taken from Water Fabric, with Hayden Powell on trumpet and flugelhorn, Per Oddvar Johansson on drums, Haspit Bansai on violin, Ellie Maclella on violin, and Yoki Munker on cello. This ambitious project reaps, I think, rewards on listening many times. A highly engaging set of tunes, again revealing a strong sense of melody and a great journey through the unique palette of sounds that this unusual lineup offers, all tied in with water and the movement of water and things about the fabric of water, with the wonderful composing and playing of Espenberg at the forefront. Water Fabric is out now on ECM and well worth a listen. And in fact, next weekend, Espen is playing at the Pizza Express in Dean Street with the vocalist Silja Niergaard, should you find yourself there for a romantic meal.
Yeah, that'd be all right. We've seen Sylvia Niergaard, and I can't remember where. Many moons ago. I think she's got a new one out, hasn't she?
Cheltenham, we saw her.
Cheltenham, was it? Cheltenham, yeah, I think you're right. Very fine indeed. Listening to Jumpin In, Chris and myself, H, with you this evening. Lovely to have your company as ever. Don't forget, if you ever want to get in contact, you can do. Chris Kane at manxradio.com, Howard Kane at manxradio.com. Both the Kanes have an E on. Love to hear from you. Any thoughts? Anyone you'd like featured? Anything you've particularly enjoyed? And any perhaps older jazz you haven't heard? Sort of classic jazz you might hear? Or special ideas? A Blue Note Bangers session? Whatever. I don't know. Get in contact anyway. Always lovely to hear from you wherever you are. Right, I'm continuing my celebration. You might have heard it on various other radio stations. Not as good as this one, of course. The centenary of the wonderful Max Roach, the quintessential bebop drummer, who pretty much outlived all his contemporaries, I think. And was playing certainly into old age. And like I said, I had the great pleasure of so many of them. I saw Blakey. I never got to see Charlie Parker or Thelonious Monk or Dizzy Gillespie, I don't recall. But I certainly did get to see Max Roach, I'm happy to say. One of the few great beboppers. And I played a little bit of his more classic stuff with Clifford Brown last week. In later years, he had a fantastic percussion ensemble, which he called Maboom, or M-Boom, depending on how you want to say it. 2 or 3 albums out. I don't know if I've got all of them, but I've always quite enjoyed this one. Live at SOB's in New York. And here they are with their take on Epistrophe. Whoa, indeed, yeah, that's something a bit different, isn't it? M-Boom, Max Roach's percussion ensemble, recorded there live in New York at SOBs in the 1990s, I think it was, or thereabouts, if memory serves correct. Something very different. Yes, January the 9th, almost to the, not quite to the day, but not far off, is it? 1992, only a week or two out in any case. I don't think they're going anymore. Obviously, Max Roach hasn't been with us for quite some time, and I'm not aware that the group carried on after his demise. Could be wrong there, but I've never really double-checked, to be honest with you. But yeah, I had 2 or 3 of their albums. I've always really enjoyed them. And as you can gather, there is tune there and melody because they use tuned percussion, but they embrace, well, pretty much anything really, the full musical spectrum harmonically, as they say, melodically and rhythmically, embracing timpani, marimba, xylophone, vibraphone, concert tom-toms, gongs, chimes, bells, and an array of instruments of determinate pitch and huge host of others with indeterminate pitch, 100 or more instruments in total. Amazing stuff. In that particular case, you might have recognised Epistrophe. And I can tell you, Roy Brooks played the glockenspiel there. Joe Chambers, great Joe Chambers, was on vibes. Omar Clay, it's a good name on the bass drum. Eli Fountain on marimba. Fred King, also marimba. Ray Mantilla, wonderful percussionist, knocking around for so long. Max Roach himself taking a drum solo there. And Warren Smith taking the timpani solo. Always enjoyed. 100 years old he would have been had he still been with us, Max Roach. I might dig out more, like I've always been a fan of Max.
Indeed. And not sure I'd like to be a roadie on that particular session.
No,
but
I think that would be one to keep up on.
Now, Crisscross Records, along with Steam and Positone, never disappoint when it comes to swinging post-bop releases. And this latest from trumpeter Jim Rotundi and his quintet, entitled Over Here, is 8th with the label. It's not going to disappoint. Here's Father John. The Montana-born trumpeter Jim Rotundi moved to Austria back in 2010 to take up the position of Professor of Trumpet at the University of Graz after a 20-year career in New York City. Quite a change then. And playing on over 80 albums as a sound man with more than 10 under his own name. But over here refers to the New York band who came over to Europe to join with Jim and tour with him. He shares the front line with tenor sax player Rick Margitza. We used to have quite a few of his. I hadn't heard a new one for a while. And a great rhythm section of pianist Danny Grissett, Joshua Ginsberg on bass, and Vladimir Kostanovich on the drums.
Good stuff, good swinging stuff like that. Now that is calm music. We often say, well, it's not calm music, that one. That one's a calm music one. We just like to redress the balance from time to time. A happy new year to our friend Rob Adams, a great supporter of the show and always pushes some fantastic music our way from north of the border quite often, or further afield, in this case, sort of north of the border and very much south of the border down in New Zealand. He says, hi guys, my first assignment of the year comes from the John Ray, the Wellington-based Scottish drummer. Yes, John Ray of Celtic Feet. Napier Stride. I used to play that on repeat, as I was saying to Rob the other day. I used to love that. So John, yes, Scottish born, Scottish whatever, and has now emigrated down to New Zealand. And he's teamed up with pianist Ben Wilcock, who actually, Ben's gone the other way. He actually spent some time in the UK, but they're now both resident in New Zealand and making some fantastic sounds out there. John's been out in New Zealand, amazingly, 15 years ago. I can't believe that. It's a sure sign that you're getting very old. And he used to play with the likes of Phil Bancroft and Colin Steele and such like. Ben lived and worked in the UK for years after visiting the Edinburgh Fringe with a theatre company, and a great fan of the likes of Thelonious Monk, Oscar Peterson, Ahmad Jamal, Errol Garner, all the greats. Anyway, they have a new one out. Interesting stuff it is, in sort of vignettes in many ways. Have a listen to this. See, that's a swinger as well. More good calm music. Not all like that. That's one of the more up-tempo tracks. A lot more meditative stuff as well. Everything's in sort of short order, as it were. I don't think there's anything longer than sort of 3-4 minutes throughout the album. I haven't had a chance to go all the way through every single track yet, but I thought it'd be nice to get it out there while it's fresh. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed River Tethys, the previous link between the two. I thought was a cracking album. I really enjoyed this one, and this one certainly seems to have a lot of promise, I think. Lots of sort of different styles, smells, lots of different drumming styles as well from John Ray, some lovely brushwork here and there. That one a bit of a swinger, as you can hear, and some nice clean, crisp work from Ben as well on the piano. New album is called Splendid Isolation, and as it's noted, it reflects John and Ben's experience in a variety of music detailed, from blues to free to sort of a bit more sort of gospel-y. Yes, a lot of different influences coming into play on the album. Something for everyone, I would say, in many ways, from melodic to blues to free expression to all points in between. Definitely worth checking out, and I'll certainly be listening to that more to try and get a bit more into some of the different styles. Great bass work there from Patrick Bleakley from Ray's New Zealand band The Troubles. Don't think I know them that well. Scottish guitarist Kevin Murray on 3 tracks on the album, and saxophonist Dan Yeebsley and Yabin Ward appear on 1 track each, and worth checking that one out. Splendid Isolation, Thick Records. So you can find that at thickrecords.co.n New Zealand. You'll find the website. You can get to download the music there, or just listen to more Jumpin' In.
We need to make a trip there sometime, don't we, really, to New Zealand? There's a Rattle is a great record label there for both classical and experimental, quite often ambient New Zealand sounds and instruments, and also great jazz.
Well, I said that Henri Texier had a new one out, and so he does. It's called An Indian's Life, and here it is. such a distinctive sound that he gets from his groups, Henri Texier, partly because of his bass. I think that warm, woody, buzzy sort of bass, his use of clarinet, often very fond of the clarinet in a modern sort of way, and just the way he voices things. And Indian's Life, it's on the Label Bleu, it's his latest one out, great reviews from Jazzman magazine. Henri on the bass there, and Sebastian on the tenor and clarinet, along with Emmanuel Kadiria on guitar, Gatia Garik on the battery, that's a drums, Carlo Nadoza on trumpet and bugle, Sylvian Rifle on sax and tenor, and some chanting there from Chimico Paganotti. And it was a lovely little tribute to Steve and Carla, to Steve Swallow and Carla Bley. Carla, of course, we lost the back end of last year.
Indeed. And mentioning New Zealand, but that's about it for this week's show. But fear not, we'll be back and in the mood for love with next week's Valentine's special. But before we go, there is track. The last track, just time for one from New Zealander Darren Pickering and his quartet, sent to us from Rattle, in fact. Following on from the acclaimed Small Worlds Volume 1, Volume 2 sees the ensemble's ambient jazz sound further enhanced by some subtle electronic textures and Darren's ever-expanding collection of modular synths, systems, iPad apps and sonic manipulations. Toys, in other words. I'm with you, Darren, as my music room will attest. Let's hear Blue Mind. See you next week in the mood for love.
Take care.